It was one of those golden afternoons where everything felt too peaceful to ever go wrong. Greg and I had just come back from the grocery store, unloading bags on the kitchen counter, when I heard the rumble of a moving truck outside. I looked out the window, curious, and there she was. A woman in sunglasses, stylish, graceful, waving like she'd known us forever. She crossed the street with that easy smile that could melt anyone's guard. "Hi, I'm Chloe," she said, her voice bright, full of warmth. "Just moved in next door. It's so nice to finally meet my neighbors." I smiled back instantly. "Welcome to the neighborhood. I'm Vanessa, and this is my husband, Greg." Greg, ever the helpful type, grinned. "Need a hand with those boxes?" Chloe laughed softly. "You read my mind. You two are already my favorite people." There was something disarming about her, like she belonged, like she'd been part of our little world all along. We chatted about the quiet streets, the nearby park, even the best bakery in town. And as the afternoon light faded, I remember thinking how rare it was to meet someone who felt so instantly right. Over the next few days, I saw Chloe everywhere, walking her dog, watering her flowers, waving from her porch with that cheerful little wave that made you feel seen. She had this effortless charm, like sunshine bottled in human form. Greg seemed to like her too. He'd smile whenever she passed by, sometimes even walk over to help her with something small, a box, a ladder, a stubborn lock. I didn't think much of it, not then. One afternoon, she came over with a plate of cookies, still warm, smelling like cinnamon and vanilla. "Just a little housewarming gift," she said, laughing as I tried one. We ended up talking for hours, about travel, work, and even silly things like our favorite movies. She told me she'd moved from Seattle after a messy breakup, as she put it, and was excited to start fresh. I liked her. She felt genuine. When she invited me for coffee later that week, I didn't hesitate. We sat in her half-unpacked living room, mugs in hand, and for a while it felt like we'd known each other forever. I remember thinking, maybe this is what friendship looks like when you least expect it. But if life has taught me anything, it's that comfort can sometimes be the softest disguise for chaos waiting to unfold. After that day, Chloe became part of my routine. The friendly knock at the door, the wave across the lawn, the quick chats that somehow stretched into full conversations. She had a way of making people feel special, like every word you said was worth listening to. Greg even joked that she was the mayor of the block already. I laughed, but there was a small flicker inside me, something I couldn't name. Maybe it was admiration, maybe curiosity. Sometimes, when she talked about her life, her laughter carried this tiny edge, the kind people get when they've been through something, but they've learned to wear it like perfume instead of pain. I noticed Greg watching her when she spoke, just for a second too long. It didn't mean anything, I told myself. We were all just being friendly neighbors. That's all it was supposed to be. That night, as I lay in bed beside Greg, I thought about how lucky we were. A beautiful home, a peaceful street, kind new neighbors. It felt like life was finally settling into place. I remember smiling into the dark, thinking, it's rare to find good people these days. I had no idea how wrong I was. It started with little things, so small I almost laughed at myself for noticing. A glass on the counter I didn't remember using. The faint trace of perfume in the hallway, one that wasn't mine. And Greg, always freshly showered when I came home from work, even on days when he claimed he'd just been relaxing. I brushed it off at first. We'd been married for years. I trusted him. But trust, I've learned, has a way of whispering before it breaks. One Thursday, I pulled into the driveway earlier than usual and saw Chloe outside, trimming her roses. She waved, her smile as bright as ever. "Hey, Vanessa, how was work?" she called out. "Busy, as always," I said, trying to sound casual. Then she tilted her head and smirked, a small playful thing that didn't quite match her words. "Oh, I can imagine. Greg must get lonely waiting for you all day." For a second, I froze. I laughed, because what else could I do? But inside, something twisted. It was such an innocent comment, yet it clung to me the whole evening like a shadow. When Greg came home later, humming like everything was fine, I decided to ask. Chloe made a weird comment today, I said softly, about you being lonely while I'm gone. Greg looked up from his plate, fork halfway to his mouth, and shrugged like it was nothing. She's just being friendly, Ness. Don't overthink it. His voice was steady, too steady, the kind of calm that feels practiced. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But something about the way he said it, dismissive, almost rehearsed, made my skin prickle. Right, friendly, I echoed, forcing a smile as I cleared the dishes. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every interaction between them, the way she'd laugh a little too loudly at his jokes, the way his tone softened when he said her name. It was probably nothing, I told myself again. People like Chloe just had that energy, magnetic, harmless. Still, doubt is funny. It doesn't shout. It hums softly in the background, waiting for you to listen. By morning, I had convinced myself it was just paranoia. I made coffee, kissed Greg goodbye, and went to work like usual. But as the day dragged on, the thought crept back in. The perfume, the glass, the laugh. Tiny, disconnected pieces that didn't mean much alone. But together, they started to form a shape I wasn't ready to see. Over the next few days, I started paying attention without meaning to. When I got home, I'd notice how the air smelled faintly different. That expensive floral scent Chloe always wore. The laundry basket seemed fuller, though I hadn't done any washing. And sometimes, when I called Greg during lunch, he wouldn't pick up, then text minutes later, "Sorry, babe, was in the garage." It was always the garage lately. Always. Still, I smiled. I laughed at his jokes. I played the role of the trusting wife because that's what love does. It makes you defend the very thing that's betraying you. And every time Chloe waved from across the street, holding her coffee or watering her flowers, I waved back like nothing was wrong, like I wasn't slowly unraveling inside. One evening, as Greg dozed off on the couch, I watched him, his peaceful face, the man I thought I knew. I wanted to ask him straight out, "Are you lying to me?" But instead, I just whispered, "Good night," and turned off the lights. Because somewhere deep down, I already knew the truth was coming. I just didn't know when. It was supposed to be an ordinary day. I'd left for work early, coffee in hand, mindful of meetings and deadlines. Halfway there, I realized I'd forgotten an important document, one Greg had printed for me the night before. I sighed, turned the car around, and headed home, not knowing that decision would change everything. The closer I got to our street, the heavier my chest felt, as if my body already knew what my heart didn't want to face. When I turned the corner, I saw it, Chloe's car, parked in front of my house. My first thought was innocent. Maybe she was dropping something off. Maybe Greg was helping her again. But then I noticed the small details. The way the blinds were half closed, the faint flicker of movement behind them. My hands went cold around the steering wheel. I parked down the street, pulse thundering in my ears. Each step toward the house felt like walking underwater. Slow, heavy, surreal. The world around me blurred. I crept closer to the side window, heart pounding so hard I thought they'd hear it. And that's when I saw her, Chloe. Her red hair glowing in the sunlight that spilled through my living room window. At first I froze. My brain tried to make sense of it. Maybe she stopped by to borrow something. Maybe Greg was just being helpful again. But then he appeared. Greg, my husband, smiling, relaxed. The kind of smile he hadn't worn around me in months. He walked up behind her, his hands on her waist, and I watched, unable to breathe, as he kissed her neck, right where I used to rest my head at night. My knees went weak. The sound of their laughter felt distant, muffled, like I was watching from underwater. I pressed my hand to my mouth to stop the sob that threatened to escape. My home, my safe place, had become their secret stage. I wanted to burst in, scream, demand to know why. But instead I just stood there, frozen in the soft hum of betrayal. Every second felt like an hour. The smell of cut grass, the sound of a passing car, the sunlight flickering on the window, all burned into my memory like cruel witnesses. Then I turned away, walked back to my car, and sat in silence. I didn't cry right away. I just stared at the steering wheel, numb, feeling the world shift beneath me. I drove back to work on autopilot. The streets blurred into colors I barely recognized. Green lawns, red stop signs, gray sky. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt familiar anymore. My hands shook on the wheel, my breath shallow. I kept hearing their laughter echoing in my head, that low, intimate sound meant for lovers, not strangers. Every turn of the tires felt like running farther from the woman I used to be. In the office, people talked around me, their voices soft and meaningless. Someone asked if I was okay. I said yes. Because how do you explain that your world just cracked open and you're still pretending it's fine? I sat at my desk, staring at the same email for 20 minutes, my heart beating to a rhythm of disbelief. She looked me in the eyes, I thought. She stood in my home. And the cruelest part? She'd smiled while doing it. That night, I didn't confront him. Not yet. I needed silence. Time to understand what kind of woman I would become after this. I went to bed beside him, feeling the space between us like a canyon. He slept peacefully, and I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, realizing something terrifying. I wasn't broken. I was waiting. That night, I moved through the house like a ghost. I cooked dinner, set the table, poured the wine, every movement deliberate, quiet, almost graceful. Greg talked about his day as if nothing had happened, his voice steady and familiar. I watched him across the table, memorizing his face, the little lines near his eyes, the way his fingers tapped when he lied. It was strange, loving someone and seeing them clearly for the first time in the same breath. He smiled, asking about my work, completely unaware of the storm sitting across from him. When he mentioned Chloe, it was casual, too casual. She asked if we could help her fix her washing machine this weekend, he said, cutting his steak. Poor thing's having all kinds of problems. My heart clenched, but my voice stayed calm. Really? I said, tilting my head. I thought you already helped her. Today. The fork froze halfway to his mouth. For a heartbeat, the room stopped breathing. What? He asked, his tone cracking slightly. What are you talking about? I looked straight at him. Not angry, not hysterical, just done pretending. I came home early, I said softly. I saw you, Greg. I saw her. For a long moment, he didn't move. The color drained from his face, and his lips parted like he wanted to say something, but the words refused to come. Then the lies started to line up behind his eyes, desperate to escape. Vanessa, listen, he began, hands trembling slightly. It's not... I cut him off before he could finish that tired sentence. Don't, I said. Don't tell me it's not what it looks like. You betrayed me. Both of you did. He reached across the table, but I leaned back, keeping the distance between us like a wall. It was a mistake, he stammered, voice cracking. It didn't mean anything. I laughed. Not loud, not bitter, just hollow. It meant enough for her to park in front of my house, I said. Enough for you to touch her in my living room. His eyes darted around, searching for something to hold on to, but there was nothing left. I took off my wedding ring slowly, the metal cold against my skin. I placed it on the table between us, next to his untouched glass of wine. You can have the house, I said quietly. Apparently it's already half hers anyway. He opened his mouth again, but I was already standing, my chair scraping against the floor, the sound sharp and final. I didn't cry. Not anymore. I'd already done that in silence. Greg sat there, speechless, his mouth half open like he was waiting for me to change my mind, as if guilt could rewind what I'd seen. He tried one last time, softer now. Vanessa, please, don't throw everything away. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt the strangest calm settle over me. You did that, I said. You just didn't notice when it happened. He dropped his gaze, shame written across his face, but I felt nothing. The space where love used to live had gone quiet. I walked toward the hallway, my steps slow, steady. The walls, once filled with laughter, dinners, plans for the future, now felt hollow, like the echo of a story that had already ended. Behind me, Greg whispered something I couldn't hear, or maybe I just didn't care to. I grabbed my coat, my purse, my dignity, and turned the knob without looking back. The cool air outside felt like freedom brushing my skin. As I stood on the porch, the lights from the house spilled across the grass, illuminating the life I was leaving behind. For years, I'd built that home brick by brick with trust, only for him to burn it in a single afternoon. But I wasn't walking away empty-handed. No, I was walking away with clarity, and that's something you can't lose once you find it. The next morning, the house was silent. Greg's side of the bed was empty, the sheets still indented where he'd tossed and turned all night. I didn't bother looking for him. I moved through the rooms collecting what was mine: the framed photos, my grandmother's jewelry, the documents I'd hidden in the drawer months ago. Every step was deliberate, every breath measured. Pain had sharpened into focus. I wasn't leaving as the victim. I was leaving as the one who finally understood. Weeks before that day, I'd started noticing inconsistencies: the lies, the small slips, the late nights. Something in me, maybe instinct, maybe survival, had pushed me to act. I'd installed small security cameras, tucked neatly behind picture frames and air vents. Not because I wanted to catch him, but because I needed to know. And now, as I sat on the couch with my laptop open, watching the footage, there was no denying it. Every touch, every whisper, every stolen afternoon, all recorded. I didn't cry. Not this time. I saved the videos, uploaded them to a new email draft, and typed one name into the recipient box: Ethan Roberts, Chloe's husband. He worked abroad, always traveling, rarely home. I hesitated only once, then hit send. The sound of that click was the most satisfying silence I'd ever heard. By the next afternoon, everything had detonated. Not in my house, but across the street. I watched from my window as Chloe's front door slammed, her voice sharp, panicked, echoing down the driveway. She was on the phone, pacing, her perfect composure unraveling one word at a time. Her husband had received my email. He knew everything. I didn't need to see the details to understand. The fallout had begun. And for once, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. A few days later, Greg showed up at my new apartment, pounding on the door like the world owed him an explanation. When I opened it, his face was red, eyes bloodshot, hands shaking with anger. "How could you do that?" he shouted. "You destroyed her marriage." I didn't even flinch. "No, Greg," I said quietly. "You both destroyed mine. I just made sure no one forgot." The silence that followed was delicious, heavy, undeniable, final. He tried to make me the villain, called me heartless, vindictive, cruel. But I'd spent too many nights drowning in pain to care what label he needed to feel like the victim. "You're heartless," he said again, voice cracking. I met his eyes and replied, "No, just done being your fool." Then I closed the door, slow, deliberate, and locked it behind me. The sound of the latch felt like justice. After he left, I sat by the window and watched the sunset bleed across the sky. For the first time in months, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. I made tea, turned on soft music, and let my body finally relax. Chloe's house stood dark across the street, blinds drawn, a for sale sign already leaning against the lawn. I almost smiled. Some endings don't need fireworks. Sometimes they just need truth. Exposed, raw, undeniable. Greg tried calling a few times after that, but I never answered. The messages went from angry to desperate to quiet. It's funny how quickly power shifts when the one who was silent decides to speak. I wasn't interested in revenge anymore. What I wanted was peace, and I had it. I'd built it myself, from the ashes of everything they ruined. In the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked stronger, lighter, whole again. People always talk about closure like it's something you're given, but I learned it's something you take. I poured another cup of tea, looked out at the empty house across the street, and whispered to myself, "You took my husband, Chloe. I took your peace." And that felt more than fair. Months passed, and life settled into a quiet rhythm. I got used to the hum of my new apartment, the way the morning sun hit the curtains, the silence that no longer hurt. Across the street, Chloe's house stood empty, curtains drawn, mailbox stuffed with uncollected flyers. Then one morning, I saw it, a fresh "for sale" sign planted on her perfect lawn. Greg's car was gone too. Just like that, the world that once revolved around their secrets had gone still. I didn't feel joy or pity, just peace. Sometimes I'd walk past that house on my way to the park, the windows blank, the garden overgrown, and think about how quickly a home can lose its soul. That place had been my battlefield, my heartbreak, my awakening. Now it was just a house, 4 walls, and a history I'd finally left behind. And then, one crisp morning, a new moving truck arrived. A young couple stepped out, laughing, full of hope, holding hands. The woman waved at me across the street, her smile bright, genuine. "Hi, I'm Lily. We just moved in," she called out. I smiled back, feeling something warm inside me I hadn't felt in a long time, the safety of a new beginning. I walked over to greet them, the cool air carrying the scent of new paint and fresh beginnings. "Welcome to the neighborhood," I said warmly, remembering how those same words had once left my lips for someone else. Lily laughed, adjusting a box in her arms. "Thank you. Maybe you can give me some advice about the neighbors here?" she asked playfully. I smiled, the kind of smile that hides entire stories behind it. "Sure," I said. "Just one. Never let anyone in when you're not home." She laughed, unaware of the weight behind my words, and I helped her carry a few boxes inside. The house looked different now, brighter, lighter, stripped of its old shadows. As I stepped over the threshold, I felt nothing but calm. No anger, no bitterness, just the quiet acknowledgement that every ending, no matter how painful, eventually makes space for something new. Back outside, I watched her husband wrap his arm around her shoulder, and for a fleeting moment, I wished them the kind of love that doesn't rot in the dark. Then I turned toward my own door, the afternoon sun warming my face. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine again, and that, I realized, was more than enough. That evening, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching Lily and her husband unpack, laughing as they tried to set up their porch light. It was strange. The same view that once held my worst memories now carried peace. The ghosts were gone. The air was light again. I realized that sometimes revenge isn't about destruction. It's about rebuilding yourself so completely that the people who broke you wouldn't recognize what's left. As the streetlights flickered on, I thought about everything that had happened. The lies, the betrayal, the unraveling, and the quiet rise that followed. I wasn't the same woman who once waved from this window, trusting too easily. I was someone stronger now, someone who'd learned that silence can be power when used wisely. I finished my tea, turned off the light, and let the darkness settle gently around me, and if anyone had been close enough to hear, they might have caught the faintest whisper. Not of bitterness, but of truth. Some neighbors borrow sugar, mine borrowed my husband. But I took back everything that was mine, and left her with nothing.